Hello everyone, this is BB Hong again, and as I promised to you from last week, I am going to be talking about the third and final part of my Sky Princess and the Gryphon Prince series, but this time I'll be talking more about the mythical characters and how they will impact the story, especially regarding their, well, not exactly real-life counterparts, but their more well-known counterparts and stories, especially ones from the Shahnameh and, by extension, Babylonian or even Hindu mythology. But anyways, for today, I'm going to be talking about Simurgh, Humbawa, Manasa, Faridun, Rostam, Gordafarid, Ormurazda, and Sarausha, as they will all play major roles regarding the story, though I can't spoil too much, but I will tell you about some of the more, you could say, crucial aspects of the story. Now, to start with the first, and you could say, well, arguably my favorite character, Simurgh, who is known as the Bird of Wisdom, as shown in the Shahnameh and various other Persian myths, as she did come from Persian or Iranian mythology, though she plays a major role in the first half of the Shahnameh, especially regarding her, you could say, indirect relation to Rostam, the famous hero and arguably the protagonist of the story, where in my story she has a major role regarding how the characters can defeat Dahak, the main antagonist slash villain, and by extension Anhria, mind you, as she is known as the Bird of Wisdom in the story as well, along with being the Queen of the Skies, because she is said to be a being that almost never touches the ground due to how large she is, and how in this story, like in the Shahnameh, she's said to live on Mount Albors, or the counterpart to it, and she is the adopted mother of Prince Zal, who was born an albino, but was unfortunately abandoned by his father because of it. However, Zal would end up playing a major role in becoming the father of Rostam himself, though that will be elaborated more on later. But anyway, in this story, she is a wise being, as stated by her title, and she's said to be the wisest of all the beings, though even though she has, you could say, omniscience. However, that does not mean she is all-powerful, nor is she immortal, as she is still inferior to the creator of Avesta Omorazda, though that will be elaborated more on later. And in this particular story, she has the ability to foretell prophecies, especially ones related to the defeat of Dahak, as she knows who Dahak is and how he can be defeated, but unfortunately no one has been able to come to her, or at least defeat him in years, because of how crafty and wily he is, especially with Andrea Mainu. However, she ends up being a crucial aspect in defeating them once and for all. As for Humbawa, his name is actually a combination of Humbaba and Huwawa, as he was often given those names depending on how you translate it. And in case you didn't know, yes, he is based on Humbaba from the Epic of Gilgamesh, who in turn came from Mesopotamian, or more specifically Babylonian mythology. And fun fact, I actually had to read this for one of my English courses regarding old literature, though in the context, my teacher actually pointed out how Humbaba didn't really do anything wrong to earn his death at the hands of both Gilgamesh and Enkidu, which is why in my story he's far more proactive, if not heroic, though given how Gilgamesh and Enkidu are not nearly as admirable or heroic in a modern sense. But then again, the definition of hero was very different at the time. But anyway, in this story, he too plays a role in defeating Dahak, the evil serpent Shah, as even he hates him, given how in this story almost everyone besides Anhria Manyu and the Deves, along with some of, you could say, Dahak's evil followers, are the only ones who bother to tolerate him, whereas everyone else in the land, or at least the world of Avesta, despises him and wants him dead. But unfortunately, thanks to Anhria Manyu, no one has been able to defeat them until, well, now. But anyway, in this case, Humbawa has a much bigger role, as he is known as the Guardian of the Forest and Lord of the Beasts, because he is said to represent the land as a result, whereas Simurgh herself represents the skies, hence why she is also called the Queen of the Skies. And in case you didn't know, she and Humbawa are actually pretty close friends because of their elemental aspects, and as a result, like he, along with Simurgh end up being major allies to the heroes in their quest to defeat Dahak once and for all. As for Manasa, or Manasseh, like in case you didn't know, she actually came from Indian culture, or at least Hindu culture, where she is said to be the goddess of snakes and is a member of the Naga race, where the Nagas were basically half human, half snake or reptilian or serpentine like beings, though they either varied on whether they were evil or not, though at least most of the time they were depicted as benevolent and in fact being followers of the gods or the devas or devis as they're called in Hinduism. And while she does have aspects of being part of Hinduism, she also is prominent in Buddhism and Jainism, at least when it comes to the Naga race. But anyway, in this case, however, she's not a goddess, as in the world of Avesta, the only true godlike being is Omurazda, because he was the one who created it. Manasa is merely a follower of his, though in her case, she's, instead of being a goddess, she's a powerful healer, but is also something of a sorceress. But in this case, she uses her abilities for good, and she mainly specializes in snake related magic or anything reptilian. And though she's unfortunately misunderstood because of this aspect, as you can see in many cultures, snakes are unfortunately vilified. Though personally, I don't think all snakes are evil, which is what the story is also trying to convey. And despite her somewhat creepy fascination with snakes and reptiles, which does unnerve the characters when they first meet her, but they quickly find out she's a lot nicer, if slightly bad tempered because of the bad reputation, which is actually accurate considering how in her original myth she was unfortunately not seen as welcome or not seen as a true goddess by the other gods of Hinduism due to her being rejected by them, and as a result she had a rather nasty temper because of it. But in this story, she's a lot nicer and doesn't really show her bad temper unless it's towards people who directly or purposefully insult her. However, she also has no problem being violent in some ways, but only towards truly evil people, as shown given how she plays a major role in saving Yasika, as well as defeating Dahak, who she despises because he, unfortunately, is one of the reasons to why snakes are often seen as evil. Well, that and his influence from Anria Mainu also doesn't help his case. But also, when it comes to Yasika, there is a part in the story where Yasika unfortunately gets kidnapped and is almost sold as, like, you can say, a sex slave, and the characters, or at least Tahir and Soraya, are forced to ask Manasa for help, considering how she is one of the few magic wielding and healing people as a result. As for Feridun, as I mentioned a bit, or at least I think I did anyway, he is technically one of the first heroes, if not the first hero to appear in the Shahnameh, like years before Rostam would make his, you could say, grand debut. And originally in the Shahnameh, or at least in Persian mythology, he was the original like defeater of Zahak, the Serpent King, who was the basis of Dahak, in case you couldn't tell. However, in my version, he actually did not succeed, as those aspects would end up being, or rather, going to both Soraya and Tahir, and by extension, the rest of their, you could say, crew. But in this case, there's a reason why. As in this version, like, Feridun is not the one who is prophesied to defeat Dahak, but rather they are, though that will be elaborated more on later, and I know it's a bit of a spoiler, but just keep in mind, as the story is still in concept form. But anyway, in this story, Feridun, he too, unfortunately, gets cursed by Dahak, at least before he could properly defeat him, although it could be a reference to how, in the original Shahnameh, he was actually prevented from killing Dahak outright, but rather he ended up having to spare him due to it being part of some grander scheme, like on Ahri, or not Ahrim, Ahura Mazda or Sarausha's part, though that will be elaborated more on later too. And in this case, Feridun, he unfortunately was very close to defeating Dahak, but unfortunately was unable to kill him due to some mishap or miscalculation on his part, and Dahak was able to take advantage of it by cursing him into becoming a dragon, which is ironically a reference to how in the original story Feridun had the ability to transform into a dragon, though he used this form as a way to test his sons, especially given the unfortunate fratricide that would happen between some of his sons, or at least one of his sons. But in this case, Feridun was turned into a dragon against his will, similar to how Tahir was unfortunately turned to a Gryphon against his will. And as a result, the others have no choice but to try and help Feridun get out of his curse alongside Tahir, though Tahir's curse state is given slightly more focus. But either way, all the people that Dahak had cursed or killed, they end up being avenged once they inevitably defeat him and Anria Mainyu, who was the one ultimately responsible for all the mishaps and misfortune that befell almost the entire continent or world of Avesta. And finally, we have Rostam himself, the famous and arguably the most popular character in all Persian mythology and history, or at least within the Shahnameh. You could say he's sort of the protagonist, considering how he's the one figure that almost everyone knows about, at least in modern day Iranian or even Middle Eastern culture. But in this case, while yes, he is a major supporting character, but he's not the true protagonist, as that goes to both Soraya and Tahir. I mean, they are the title characters after all. And in this case, he's a major supporting character who's, you could say, the boisterous but still humble warrior who helps the characters when they realize that they have similar goals, as he too has been trying to defeat Dahak but was unfortunately unsuccessful, along with having to deal with several other issues that have been plaguing him. And in this case, he too is, you could say, kind of similar to Hercules or Heracles, and you could say he is his Persian counterpart, as they both possess superhuman strength, along with having similar tasks, though he has at least 7 tasks or labors, whereas Hercules had 12. But either way, they're both very prominent heroic characters, and I figured it would be appropriate to feature Rostam in this story, because, well, why not? And then we have Gordafari, the warrior woman who also appears within the Shahnameh, although in her case, her major role within the story involves her fighting against Sorab, who is ironically the son of Rostam, though unfortunately Rostam didn't realize it, which leads to very tragic results that you could say rivals Greek tragedy. But in this case, she and Rostam are actually lovers, and or at least they eventually become lovers as a result of them admiring each other's strength. Though ironically, in the original Shahnameh story, which she originated from, she actually seemed to have more romantic, or at least rather something of more intimate relations with Sorab, who ended up falling for her the moment he found out that she was a woman, or be a very strong and powerful woman who was almost his equal. Though they ended up fighting each other due to a war that happened between their tribes, or at least in Sorab's case, he was fighting on behalf of his kingdom, whereas she was fighting on behalf of her tribe and was actually trying to distract him, while her father and the rest of their family had to evacuate their people. Though in my story, she ends up being conflated with Tamine, who was the actual lover of Rostam, whereas Rostam ends up having traits of Sorab, who is his son. So of course, in my version, they end up becoming allies along with being lovers. Though in her case, she ends up appearing in the story when, due to a terrible misunderstanding, she ends up fighting against the main characters. However, she is able to quickly ally with them and make up for her assault due to discovering that they are trying to stop Dahak, and she obviously ends up joining them because she is still a heroine in her own right. And another trait I wanted to add was that she loves dogs, such as the Saluki dogs Maros and Anzor, as mentioned in my previous video, and you could say she's a bit of a dog lover, especially since, well, these particular dogs were trained as hunting dogs, which also makes it even better for her, as she can fight alongside them as well as be able to take care of them. And now we have Ormurazda, who is the creator, along with being the main deity who is worshipped within the Avestan culture and, you could say, religion, although he is based on how his Zoroastrian counterpart is also seen as the creator of the world and has elements of the Abrahamic God from either Christianity, Judaism, or even Islam. In this story, he is definitely the big good, as he serves as a way to help the characters, though in this case, he has to do it subtly as a way to help them figure things out for themselves and to not intervene or accidentally make things worse, though he will intervene in the form of, say, Deus ex machinas or divine intervention. I'll be very rarely, because again, he wants them to figure it out for themselves and not have to, say, slack off or become lax due to their battle with both Zahak or Dahak and Anria, mind you. And his name is actually a combination of Ahura Mazda as well as Ormaz, as those were the various different, say, depictions or pronunciations of his name, depending on how you pronounced it or spelled it. And finally, we have Sarausha, who is basically a divine spirit, or you could say angel or angelic spirit, who serves under Omurasa and is usually a messenger or a helper of some kind. Though in Persian, he's called Yazatas, who are basically divine beings similar to, you could say, angels, though that's not exactly the correct term, but it is the closest thing we have. And similar to Ormuzda, he originated from Zoroastrianism and Persian mythology, though his name is a combination of Srausha and Saraush, as those were some translations or different depictions of his name. And he too serves as a major supporting character who helps the heroes defeat both Dahak and Anria Manyu, though his main focus is Anria Manyu, given how Anria Manyu is the main, or you see, the true final boss of the story. Not to mention, he also played a pivotal role in imprisoning Zahak, at least in the original Shahnameh. But because the circumstances of the stories are different in my version of those particular stories, he will have a slightly different role, but it will be relatively the same regardless. And that's basically the end of this video series. If you want to support the story, as I plan on making it, you could say, something of a magnum opus of mine, though there will be other stories that I plan on doing, though it won't be directly related to this one. But regardless, I want to at least make this a special series if I can. So if you want to support me, click the like and subscribe button, or even donate on my Ko-fi link if you have, which is on my main channel page. So overall, thank you for watching or listening, and have a great day. So up until then, stay tuned.